or you are shortly likely to experience the following situation. You're at your station in the radio room. You and the entire crew have been at general quarters for 5 hours. It's hot and you're sweating. Not so much from the heat, but you know that something's going to happen. Not a transmitter in the whole task force has let out a peep. You've had your orders to maintain strict radio silence until action is joined. You know what that means. You're hunting the enemy now, and you're getting close. Battle is imminent. It won't be long. This is the real thing. You've waited and trained a long time for this moment. It's like waiting for the whistle to blow before the first kickoff. It's the first time for you. You're not scared, but you don't feel too well. Nobody talks. Not much sound. The phones are clamped over your ears, but you haven't heard a thing except static. It's quiet now, but once the enemy is sighted, you know the circuit's going to be plenty hot because it's the Force Tactical Circuit. You're going to be busy as hell. There are going to be messages and lots of them, and you know it's up to you to get them. You can't miss a letter this time. You feel like the whole operation is depending on you. So you sit there and wait. You know the settings of your receiver are right where they should be. You've checked them again and again. You look down at your scratch pad and see the doodles you've been drawing. Funny things you draw at a time like this. There's something that might be a house. Yeah, like the one you lived in back in Clarksburg. Yes, you think of a lot of things.
Attention all hands, now hear this. We've just sighted the enemy on the starboard bow and will open fire shortly. Stand by.
This is it. You're still sweating, but you're cold and hot, too, at the same time. You readjust your phones. Yep, there it is. The circuit's alive now, all right. Here's the whistle and the kickoff. It's a general order to all ships in the task force. If you don't get this now, you'll never forgive yourself. But you're not as excited as you thought you'd be. You're copying solid when all of a sudden, something goes haywire. You can't even hear the signal. What are you going to do? You swear at the technicians. Why can't they see that these receivers are in shape? It's probably a loose connection, or maybe a tube's gone out. Whatever it is, it's making an awful racket. You call the technician and hope the hell he gets there in a hurry. You go back to your set. The darn noise is as bad as ever, driving you crazy. So you shut off the receiver. There. That's better. At least it's quiet now. But that message, you know that it's information the skipper needs right away. He might make a miscalculation without it. Why doesn't the technician come? I wish you could do something. You feel so useless. Well, at least you might open the receiver. Yes, he'll have to open the receiver when he gets there. Where's that screwdriver? And you could take out the tubes. He'll have to check them, so you might as well have them out and ready for him. That's using your head. Now, at least, you think you're making every second count. Now, when the technician walks in, he'll find the receiver apart and the tubes lined up in a neat row along the desk, all ready for him to check.
That is exactly what the enemy wants you to do. To mobilize your receiver. Lose valuable time when time is important. You're playing right into the enemy's hands.
Say, wait a minute, mister. When that awful racket started up, I thought sure my receiver had gone haywire, so I was just trying to do what I could. What should I have done?
Well, instead of taking your receiver apart, you should have found out where the interference was coming from.
Sure, but how do I do that?
Well, before I answer that one, I'd like to tell you about interference itself. In the first place, there are two kinds of interference, intentional and unintentional. Intentional interference is called jamming. It is deliberate emissions used to impair or block radio reception. Unintentional interference is called simply interference. It is caused by atmospheric and unwanted signals not known to be deliberate, or the effects of electrical apparatus or machinery.
Yeah, I know what atmospheric static is and what it sounds like when the guy next door is shaving with an electric razor. But what about this jamming?
Well, that's one of the reasons why this series of recordings has been prepared for you radio operators and technicians. Since the start of World War II, radio jamming has become such a serious problem that you men who operate the U.S. Navy radio circuits and schedules must realize that the enemy is jamming our circuits, and you must be able to take effective measures against it. Upon you rests the responsibility of maintaining perhaps the most necessary element in modern warfare, communication. Rapid and accurate radio communication. You see, synchronization of naval operations is the all-important factor which enables a task force to strike with full effect, and synchronization would be impossible unless our communication channels are effectively maintained.
Yes, sir. I can see how important it is to maintain communication.
And so does the enemy. At every opportunity, he will attempt to block our radio channels by jamming. That is, by transmitting deliberate radio interference on our circuits and schedules. The success of a mission depends upon reliable radio communication. And if the enemy can disrupt us by jamming, he can throw us into confusion and even jeopardize the entire combat operation.
Did you say the enemy has already been jamming us?
Yes. Both the Germans and the Japanese have given us some trouble. And we believe they have more jamming transmitters ready to use against us at the most opportune time.
What do you mean by the most opportune time?
Well, the enemy isn't going to waste their power to jam unimportant traffic. But it's up to you to expect and be prepared for jamming so that you can minimize as much as possible its effect.
Well, how far is it possible to minimize it? And if I do, can I get my messages through?
That depends upon the type of jamming that the enemy is using. But experience has shown that jamming is 60% less effective when used against operators who have been trained to expect and to counter it than it is when used against untrained and unsuspecting operators. The most essential thing is for you to know when you're being jammed and when you're not being jammed.
Well, even if I do know I'm being jammed, what good is that going to do if I can't read the signal?
Well, if you realize that you're being jammed, at least you will not be thrown into a panic believing your receiver to be at fault, and you will be able to minimize its effect by taking the countermeasures, which will be explained to you later in this transcription. Even though you're not able to completely eliminate the jamming, if you have recognized it, you have partially defeated the enemy's purpose. Another reason it is important to recognize jamming is so that you may immediately inform the supervisor, who will then pass this information to the bridge and communications officer. They may then conclude that the enemy is aware of the presence and operations of the task force.
Can transmitters be jammed as well as receivers?
No. Jamming is effective only against receivers. If you are on the transmitting end and you hear a jamming signal on your receiver, that does not necessarily indicate that the other fellow who is copying your signal is also being jammed. You see, the jamming transmitter may be located closer to you than it is to the receiving station, and its effect may only be local.
You mean I should keep right on sending, even though I don't know whether the other fellow is getting me or not?
Yes. You should continue to send blind even though your own receiver is being jammed. If you stop sending, slow down, or repeat, the enemy will be encouraged. This is a game played by three persons: the transmitting operator, the receiving operator, and the enemy jamming operator. You see, if the jamming operator believes that he's being successful in jamming you, and you admit this by stopping, slowing down, or sending words twice, the enemy has strike number one on the receiving operator at the distant end of the radio circuit, who has not even entered the game.